Alright, so we have our low poly model. I spent some time optimizing my shoulder pads here. I just rebuilt them using the tools I mentioned in the previous video. I left my belts kind of high poly. I'm going to redo them later on. I might just clean him up, which is actually going to be pretty tough, but I kind of want to go through that just in case you guys do it too. Then I'll show you some of the tips and tricks for that. Same with my, my hair here. It's pretty high poly, so I'm probably going to optimize it quite a bit. I'm at about 32,000 polys, so I still need to shave around 12,000 off this guy, which isn't too bad. You know, between the belt and the hair and the horns, that really shouldn't be a problem. Even this belt here too. So next we're going to unwrap this guy, and then we're going to bake out some textures in the next video after that. So your character should consist of two different textures. What we typically do is we do one for the head, and then one for the body and kind of all the assets and stuff like that. So we're going to kind of do it that way. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is separate your head from your body. Just for UVing purposes, we'll reattach him later on. So you're gonna have to find a good place to detach your head. For me, it's nice and easy. I have this beard, so I can kind of detach my head along those seams, so I don't actually get any texture seams when I'm painting it up later on. So what I'm going to do is I've also deleted the back of my head here because it's covered in my hair. I actually don't need those two either. So there you go, little lower poly. Right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go to my left viewport here, unhide my my beard. So I'm just going to select my face. I'm going to keep my ears as well, and then just kind of break it off right under the ears. So I'm just going to select all of this, just kind of roughly at first. Just make sure I get all of my ear, all that. I'm just going to, with holding Alt, I'm just going to deselect some of these polygons, and I'm just going to get nice and tight around the ear there. It's pretty typical in the games industry that we'll do a different texture for the head and the body, especially for AAA games. It really depends on the size and scope of your game and how far away your character is going to be. For like an indie game or something like that, we would probably do it all as one, just so we can save texture count and all that kind of jazz. So actually, I'm just going to include this just to have it nice and clean. But for your characters, we're going to do two of them, just to give ourselves a little bit of room to play around with and all that. So I'll keep that guy there too. So that should be pretty good. If I unhide my beard, see that it's pretty well hidden there. You could kind of see it there, so I might just lower my beard just to hide that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just detach. I'm going to use this detach button here. I'm going to call this face. This is only temporary. We're not going to keep it detached. We're going to weld them back in together. So don't worry about that too much. All right, I'm going to go to my beard here. I'm just going to use the freeform tools here. Just to drag that down a little bit. So I'm just going to use the shift tool here. I'm just going to drag my, probably go a little smaller. There we go, just a little bit, just to hide that there. So I'm going to select my face, convert it to an edible poly, and I'm going to use the attach button to attach all the different elements of my head. So my hair, my horns, and my eyes as well. My eyes are really high poly right now, but that's okay too. So that's going to be basically one texture, and then my body is going to be the other one with all these different elements. So I'm going to attach these guys together as well. They're different material IDs for some reason. I'm not going to need that, but that's okay for now. There we go. So, oh, and I missed an armor piece here. There. And there. I don't need multiple materials, so I'm just going to select all my faces here and go down here to my polygon material IDs. I'm just going to right click on this guy just to set, or just click down to set it to 1. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear my smoothing groups and just put them all to 1. It's going to look a little blobby, but that's okay. We're going to get all our crispy normal information from our textures. And do the exact same thing for the head. So I'm going to select it all. Going to make sure that's 1 and 1 like that. So it's all nice and clean. I'm going to save my max file. I'm going to save a backup actually, just in case. So now comes the fun and awful part of unwrapping our models. So let's just start with the head here. I'm going to add a unwrap UVW modifier from my my pull down here. For me, it's on my stack, so I'm just going to add that there. And I'm going to hit Open UV Editor. I'm going to click this blue box just to get rid of that back texture for now. So let's take a look. It should be a gigantic mess right now, which is totally fine. And you can see these squares here. Those are actually my eyes, so those are actually unwrapped pretty good. I mean, they're just kind of flat unwrapped, but I'm going to go here. I'm going to select just a random face on my eye. Doesn't matter which one. I'm going to go on my side panel here, and I'm going to hit this this little plus here. It's grow. I'm just going to keep clicking it a bunch of times until all of my eyes are selected. I'm just going to move these eyes just out of the way somewhere. They're not actually, just looking at them again, they're not that greatly textured because, or unwrapped because they're there. So we'll take a look at those now in a bit. So the very first thing you're going to want to do when you start your unwrap, I'm assuming you guys have unwrapped before. If you haven't, what an unwrap is, it's basically a coordinate system to tell all these polygons where they should be grabbing texture information from, basically. So if we apply any sort of texture to this, whether it's wood grain or whatever it is, the model needs to know how to apply that texture onto this model. And it can't do that by default. You need to tell it expressly exactly, where to pull texture from. When we do a bake and a texture map, we want all these pieces of our body and of our face here to be unique. When we paint across this guy, if we want to scratch on one side or dirt on one side, we want it all to be unique. So what we're going to do is we're going to unwrap all of this onto this square here. It all needs to fit into that square. We can't have stuff outside of the square, no overlapping, nothing like that. Otherwise it'll screw up your bake. So so what we're going to do is very first thing is we're just going to split up all our elements into just different quadrants. So we have our eyes already there. I'm going to select one of these horns, just going to select a bunch of pieces, going to hit the plus, the grow sign again a whole bunch of times, and then I'm just going to move that along there. These guys might be together, so one of the other things we could do is with this select by element UV toggle on, we just click it and it should select our entire mesh here. So we have our face and we have the other horns. So they're nicely separated out. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to unwrap these things. We're going to need to flatten them out. The best way I can explain it is if you take a box and you cut it apart, when you lay it flat, that box is now a flat piece, but it was a 3D object, and now you can paint on all those pieces of a box and then fold it back up to a box, and it'll be 3D, and those things will wrap around all those meshes. So it's the same kind of idea. Another example that we use a lot is wrapping presents. You have a flat sheet that's your wrapping paper, and you need to wrap that around whatever it is. So doing something like a box isn't too bad. You just fold it over the edges, cut it out where you need to, and it looks nice. Trying to wrap up something like a bicycle or a bag of something or something really organic proves to be a lot harder. Where you're going to fold things, have seams, you're not going to be able to flawlessly wrap something around something as organic as this. So you're going to need to pick places where your seams are going to be, and then you're going to want to eliminate as much stretching as you possibly can. So let's take a look at our horns here. I'm going to select my horn, just one of them, doesn't really matter which one right now. And I'm going to go to mapping and flatten mapping and just hit OK. This is just going to auto flatten out some sections based on 45-degree angles, so it does its best job to kind of try and flatten stuff out. This is not acceptable for painting on. We have all these little loose pieces here that if you tried to paint over, they would be isolated and would look really bad. If you imagine that this square here is a texture that you're going to paint these horns on, it'd be really hard to try and paint patterns from here, and then they have to wrap here and there to get like a straight line across this horn. So we need to help this out as much as we can. We need to have this as clean and as nice as we possibly can. One of the tools we have to help us understand how a texture is going to look on this is a checker pattern up here, up on the top right. If you click on the top checker pattern, you click that on, you'll see that a checker appears on all our meshes. Now, because we flat mapped our horn, these checkers are, they actually look like proper squares, but then you have all these really weird little missing pieces. But when we look at our face, there's just, some of the checkers here are stretched, some are super tiled, others are doing this crazy stuff, whatever this is. You'll never be able to paint on top of something that looks like this. You want it to start looking a lot more clean, like this guy. Horns actually are one of the harder things to wrap because you can't ever properly flatten this out. You're going to have a seam somewhere. And so you're going to have to kind of pick and choose where you want a seam on this horn. When picking such things, you either want to pick them along details of your mesh. So if I had a nice ridge on this horn along here, I would put my seam there. Or you want to put it in a place where you think the player will see it the least. So usually on the insides of models, not on the outside. So if people are looking at it like this, they're not going to see the seam there. They might see it here, but it'll be farther away and obscured by things a lot. So it's kind of hard to pick and choose where that's going to go. So we start off by just kind of understanding these pieces here. So this piece here is that outside guy there. This one here is beside it. And just kind of click through your elements here and kind of figure out where they're going to be. Now if you notice that by selecting one of these, other parts become blue. If I go into edge mode and I select one of these edges, what it's going to tell me is that these two edges are actually the same. They're, let me just zoom in here. They're that edge right there. So they're both the same edge. One is from this side and one is from that side. So what we want is we want to stitch all these things together and leave as little seams as we can without messing up these squares too much. So the first thing we're going to do, what I like doing is picking our seam. So I'm going to select this object here. I'm going to turn off my element so I can just deselect certain faces. I'm just going to deselect some of these faces here. And I'm going to try and get a nice crisp seam right along there. So there we go. That'll be that guy. So with this selected, if I move it around, those guys will start stretching, and that's not something that we want. If you click D or go to Tools and Detach, what that'll do, is actually just detach these guys. So those will stay as clean as they are. So this is going to be our starting point. We're going to start our horn from here and try and attach the rest of the horn onto this side, and we'll leave this outer edge as our gap. So what we can start doing is if I select one of these edges here, for instance, we'll see that this is the part that belongs in here. With one of these edges selected, I could go to Tools, Stitch Selected, and that is going to bring up this little dialog. Now with Align Cluster, it's actually going to move that cluster over there. Scale Cluster is going to try and match the scale of the original edge we had selected. And then the bias is going to decide how much of the scale to take. So it's going to try and take 50% of the scale from both and adjust it. If I put it to 0, it's only going to scale the little element coming in. And if I put this to 1, it's going to only scale the edge I had selected. So I'm going to set this to 0. And you can start seeing that these guys are all going to be, they all share the same edge. But they're overlapping right now. This guy's kind of on a weird edge. And so what we want to do is we want to stitch these guys together. So I could just go to select one of these, go to Tools, Stitch Selected. And this time I'm going to want to do a 0.5. I want to adjust it midway between the two positions. So if I do, you'll see there they're going to start moving. If I go to 0 or if I go all the way to 1. It's going to be the two positions between those two. So 0.5 will be a nice average. I'll get a little bit of stretch between both squares. but it won't be too bad. So I could do that for all these other guys too. Start doing that. If you do every other edge, it'll auto stitch the ones in between. So you could start doing something like that, and we start getting a nicer edge. So let's take a look at where this is on our horn. This will be down here, and you'll see that green line is now gone because we've stitched those together, and we're getting a little bit of bending and stretching in our squares, but it's not too bad. So we can continue doing that with these squares here. Right, same thing, 0. I'm going to do a couple at the same time. Tool, stitch selected, and this is where we start getting to a problem. It's going to start trying to attach this whole thing, but it's it's curved on the outside like that. So it's not definitely something we don't want at this point. So I'm just going to just kind of adjust this guy. Do a 0.5. There we go. And I'm just going to continue doing that with all these elements, and trying my best to get these guys to look as good as I can. Sometimes with a shape like this, you're going to get weird things that start happening when you start trying to stitch too much of this together. You're going to start getting really weird stuff like that. Now trying to deal with that is just awful. And this is why unwrapping is one of those just terrible things. We tried doing a couple different things. Let me see how a pelt looks on this. So what a pelt does is it tries to, kind of like a pelt of an animal, it tries to stretch it out as best it can within this circle and try and maintain the stretch. Not really a good tool for this horn right now. So what we're going to have to start doing is trying to unwrap this guy as best as we can manually, which is awful, but just something you got to do. So one of the things that'll really help is to try and go through here and straighten out some of these elements here. So let's see what we can do with what we got. So one of the things that you can do is start trying to just to try and curve this back to a bit of a straight kind of piece like this. I'm just selecting verts and just rotating them as a whole, just trying to straighten this guy out. You're gonna get a bit of warping and bending and stuff, but there's not too much you can do with these kinds of shapes. It's just something that you're gonna have to deal with and find out where to sacrifice all these different elements. So kind of straightened out that guy. Just getting a little bit of warping, but not too bad. I'm going to do the same thing for this guy. All right, just kind of straighten them out like that a little. Again, this is as tedious as it looks, and unfortunately, sometimes, I'll show you some better ways of doing different parts of your head and your body and stuff like that, but unfortunately, a lot of unwrapping is still just a painstaking, just terrible experience. So if you're frustrated, if you feel it's taking too long, that is perfectly normal because it's the worst. And hopefully one day somebody will write a program to get rid of all of this workflow and allow us just to make some awesome art, and that person will probably be a billionaire because every artist on the planet will pay any money to get rid of this part of the process. So now when I go to stitch selected, you'll see that these guys are starting to look a lot better. They're starting to look a lot closer to fitting. So we still get a lot of weird overlap, and here things are kind of apart, but at least now I can start you know, start getting this looking a little better. All right, so let's just keep going with this. And I'm missing some elements in there. And then for pieces like this, sometimes you gotta just manually start, moving them around. So try and figure out where, that guy obviously connects there. So this one's really short. So I'm going to just kind of move him up here. And unfortunately, sometimes you're just gonna have to try and do your best to align all these pieces kind of manually. Before you can let Stitch Selected or some of the other tools do their jobs. Something like that. Again, it's not going to be perfect, right? You might even want to move. There's nothing wrong with getting like a bit of a curve in here as well. It's not something you're really going to be able to avoid. So, try and kind of center things out as best as you can yourself. And then let Stitch Selected do the rest of the work. You're going to have a lot of unwrapping to do with your characters, so I highly recommend saving a lot. It is 3D Max, it will crash on you. Unfortunately, I don't know if they fixed it in 2015. I'm using 2013 still. You can't do Control S while in the editor. It doesn't actually save. I actually have to go up here and do save. I don't know why. It's just kind of crazy. So just make sure you save a lot. Alright, so you see I brought that guy in there. Now these guys are really, really far away. So I'm just going to move them a little closer. There we go. Sometimes your mesh might start doing some crazy things. You might have to adjust. And a lot of this is just practice. You're just gonna, get better at it slightly. It's one of those things, I've never really seen anybody overly amazing at doing this really, really fast. Some people have their own little tricks and stuff like that that help along the way. But in the end, it sucks for everybody. So. Alright, so let's take a look after we've done all this stitching here, what our model's going to look like. What are our seams and our... there. So if I start looking around, I'm getting a little bit of warping here, a little warping there. But overall it's looking pretty solid. I'm almost there. I'm about halfway done my horn right now. So, I'm going to go through and do the same thing for this horn. Just continue adding it and kind of arraying it across the side. And then I'm going to do that for the other horn as well. So let's move on and let's take a look at my beard here, or my face, sorry, not my beard. So I'm going to rip apart my ears from my face because they don't need to be, attached in the UVs, which is awesome. We can actually detach them and have a nice seam along the ears, which is great because otherwise it'd be awful to try and do that. So there we go. So something like that looks like it'll be pretty good. If any of your pieces are ever getting in the way, you might want to convert to an editable poly, hide your beard, and then go back to fixing that up. So if I wanted to, I could just go here, convert to an editable poly. You're not going to lose that unwrap. It's always going to be there. I'm just going to go to hide. And I'm just going to add unwrap again, open it up. And I can continue from where I left off. So let's just all right. There we go. So let's just do that again. So I'm just going to deselect. I'm going to make sure this is off when I deselect, otherwise there's a little tool here called Ignore Backfacing. If that's on and I deselect, it's only going to deselect half my face. It's only the things that I can actually visibly see. If that's off, it'll actually deselect or select the entire thing, which in this case is what I want. So I'm just going to, there we go, do that. So I'm going to separate those ears out. Same thing, I'm going to hit D to detach, put the ears on the side. This will be my face. And then individually for the ears, what I'm going to do here is, I know these guys are symmetried, so I really don't want to unwrap 2 ears. That would be the worst. So we're going to unwrap one, and then we'll do a little bit of a cheat to unwrap the other. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to split your ear up even further into the front and the back, because you won't be able to flatten out something like a whole sphere like that, like try and imagine unwrapping a sphere without any stretching. So I'm going to just select, I hit F4 to put my wireframe back on. Just going to select the back of my ear. I think that's, oh, I left that as part of my ear. That's definitely going to be part of my face, so I just got to make sure I remember that for later. I'm going to do this whole edge in here as well. Depends how well I want to hide my seam. Right now, I don't really care. I'm going to put this Ignore Backfacing back on, because you can see I'm starting to select things in the front of my ear, which is not what I want. So I'm just going to go through and leave that there. Sometimes it's a little hard to see behind your ear. Sometimes it takes a little bit of finagling. Alright, deselect my face there, so that'll be the back of my ear. I can tell I have nothing from my face selected, because if I select something in my face, you see this this box here, my freeform mode box, is huge. I can see that it's selecting something on my face, so it's a good way of always knowing what you're selecting there. So I'm going to just detach that, so I have a back of my ear, I have a front of my ear. So luckily, something as simple as this is actually a lot easier to unwrap than what our horns were. With that back of the ear selected, I can go into my regular, my unwrap menu here, and I'm going to select this little guy under peel called Pelt Map. I'm going to select Pelt Map. It's going to try and flatten it out within this circle. I'm going to hit Start Pelt. It's going to stretch it out over this thing, which is going to totally screw up your UVs, which is fine. And now I'm going to go Start Relax. And what that's going to try and do is slowly try and get this back into a shape where those squares aren't too stretched out. So I'm going to just hit that, and it'll just run for a little bit, and it'll stop, or you can stop it manually. Once it's done, you can hit Commit. And if you look back here, if I put my checkers back on, checkers are looking pretty solid. They're there's a little bit of stretching here and there, but overall that's quite nice. I don't really care about the scale of all this stuff right now, so I'm just going to put this ear somewhere where it's just out of the way. And I'm going to do the front of the ear as well. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to activate Pelt. And I'll go Start Pelt. Oh, it's doing something crazy. Sometimes your ear might do something nuts, which mine is doing. I know exactly what it's doing, I think. It's because I have this face selected over here, that guy, and he is not attached to this part of the ear, so I don't want that, so I just deselected him. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to hit Pelt. I'm going to go Start Pelt. It's going to make my ear all bubbly, and I'm going to go hit Relax. And I'm going to do Commit. And that'll be my ear. And it's probably not perfect. You'll see here I have some overlapping geometry, maybe. Let's see how good of a job it did. It's a little weak because this part's so deep in there. I may want to just select a few of those guys and just grow them out a little. Yeah, it did an okay job. They're really stretched and really bad in there, but it's the really deep part of my ear. It's going to be fairly black and just dark, so I don't really care at this point. I feel that's okay. So that's all good. My ears or one of my ears is done. Now I can go through and do the exact same thing for this other ear. I can select the back faces, do my pelt map and all that, but that's boring. So I'm just going to go to convert to edit poly, and oh, actually, sorry. I missed a step. Go back to your unwrap and go select faces in here. Go find your ear and select both of those unwraps that you did there. With that selected. Now with those selected, go to convert to editable poly. And in editable poly, select faces, and that ear that you had selected in there will be selected in here as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just attach this ear as a different mesh. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to go back in here and unhide my beard. Maybe I'll do that later. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Unwrap Editor again. Going to open up the editor. I could have done this last time too. And I'm going to select my other ear, which is right over here. I'm going to make sure that it's selected there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing, convert to editable poly. Now instead of detaching this one, I'm just going to delete it. And what I'm going to do with this ear is I'm going to just throw a symmetry on there. It's going to plop it up over here. I have some geometry that I overlapped, so in here I'm just going to go delete those parts of that ear. You'll see there. And with my face selected, I'm going to hit the attach button. I'm going to attach those ears. And then these verts are now no longer welded together, so I'm just going to weld those back in. So I'm just going to select generally around my ears. Right, something like that. I'm going to go to weld. I'm going to open up the little weld dialog. And I'm just going to lower this number to something quite low. And you should see that your vert count should change mine's from 357 to 340. And if it's still not quite high, I might want to change it up a little higher. All depending on whether your stuff is welding properly or not. And then I'll hit OK. And now I'm going to just unhide my beard again. Going to add that unwrapper, open it up. And now you'll see if I go into this guy here, if I click on these, they'll be occupying the same space because they're mirrored. Now I got 2 ears, 2 back ears, and both sides are done. Much faster than having to repeat that process again. So I'm just going to save this and move on to my beard. So my beard is pretty complex. I'm definitely not going to be able to do this all in one pelt. So I'm going to need to do the same thing that I did for the ear and just start breaking it up into different pieces. Well, actually, I guess I should do my face first because I had that left over. So I'm going to select this little piece here that I had left over from my ear. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to mapping, flatten mapping. That's just going to put it all in here. Don't have to do that, but it sometimes helps if you got like loose objects and things like that. With all that selected, I'm going to hit pelt and see what that does. If I go start pelt, it's going to terrifyingly stretch out my face. I'm going to hit relax, and it's going to try and do its best to make my face look pretty good. Now let's take a look at my face here. That's pretty decent. Yeah, again, not perfect, but pretty good. Let's see what it's doing here. My nose is doing some crazy overlapping in here, which is not good. You see that there? That's some bad geometry or bad unwrapping. You do not want overlaps like that. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to take these polygons here. And I'm either going to have to clean them up myself, or just detach them and do a separate separate unwrap on them altogether. So it really depends. Sometimes you got to watch out with your unwraps to make sure that you're not getting any funky overlapping geometry like this. So I could detach those and then do a pelt map on those as well, or I can try and do my best to just kind of even these guys out and make sure there's no overlapping geo. Again, because this is the inside of my nose, I don't really care if I have a lot of stretching, or I mean, if it was a lot, it would be bad, but if I just have a bit of stretching, it's probably not going to be the end of the world. Again, it really depends on the quality of your game, how close you're getting to your characters when you make these decisions. So I think for my purposes, I think that's okay. So I'm going to do that to the other side as well. Just clean this up here. All right. So again, not great, but pretty good. And then let's take a look at my mouth here. I think my mouth was doing some crazy overlap as well. Take a look at that. You know, you got some really funky overlap going on in here. Let's take a closer look. You know, it should have done a bit of a better job at that, but it didn't. So you might have to go through and, which I will, and just readjust this stuff. So again, you want this as clean as you can get it. Your first time in, you definitely don't want to have to redo any of this, and sometimes it can get really messy, really confusing. But just take your time and figure this stuff out. Make sure it's done right. You know, if I was doing a proper mouth, I would probably do a seam along the mouth somewhere as well, along the lips, and do that for the mouth sac. A lot of times we build the insides of mouths. They're unfortunately called a mouth sac, and that's where, you know, like the tongue will live and all that kind of stuff. We'll just throw that in there. Teeth and gums, and you know, so if a character speaks, it's not just like a hollow, empty shell. There's something in there for you to see. Okay, and top of my lips here are a little funky as well, so I may have to just, you know, stretch out some of this stuff and just give it a little bit of space. All right, give it a little bit of breathing space. You got to really understand, you know, how much detail you're going to need in here for your bakes and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, do your best when you're doing your unwraps. You know, they're never going to be absolutely perfect. It's just impossible. But again, do your best, and the most important part is there's no overlap, because that's really going to show when you start painting. You don't want to do any of that. So, all right, let's go through here. Let's just give this a little bit of breathing space. All right, that's looking pretty good. A little scary, a little good. All right, so we'll put that head on the side there. And next we will do, we'll leave that horn later. Surprisingly, the horns are the most annoying part of this mesh. So let's do this hair area here. So I'm going to select the bottom of my beard, because I could have a seam going along here and it'll be okay. So let me, yeah, I'm just going to go to mapping, flat mapping. Sometimes this will just give me some nice shapes to start with. So I'm assuming this is the bottom. There we go. Beats having to select all that. So you know, go through, take a look at your mesh, you know, really understand where you're going to be seeing him from. And you know, make sure your seams are as hidden as possible. That's one of the most challenging parts I find about character modeling, one of the hardest things to really kind of learn is where to hide seams, how to hide them, how to mask them. If you look at really big AAA companies, they'll actually make multiple textures for a character to hide seams. I know for Uncharted, they modeled Drake with like little strips of geo along all his shirt seams, and then on a separate unwrap channel they did a second unwrap to just like a texture of seams and like stitches and things like that, and that was their way of dealing with seams. So they just actually put in like a whole bunch of resources to hide them. Yeah, it's not the greatest, but I think that'll do. So let me just select some more up here. You can do the opposite thing for your beard, where you can hide your face and your other things if it's getting in your way, if you have a beard on your character. Might have to just stop that there. Yeah, I might do that for this side too. I might not go all the way up just in case you can see that. And I really don't like these ones either, so I'm just going to remove that strip of geometry. Alright, so it's kind of funky. I mean, it's not ideal. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flat map this one. I'm going to use this planar map here, and it's just going to project it from the top. I'm going to turn that off. So that'll be the bottom of my beard. Again, it's not great, but I'm not, it's not a very important part of my mesh, so that's okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is do this front goatee and probably up to the sideburns or so. So let me see if I could find some good pieces here. Let's see, there's that. That there. Sometimes they're very scattered. This one will be a whole bunch of things, so I don't want that. Yeah, I definitely got to be careful with that. So looks like the rest of it I'm doing by hand. So I'm just going to, because this looks like it's going to be a big pain in the butt, I'm just going to select my beard, go to hide unselected, and just focus on that. Yeah, that looks awesome. I'll show you your seams sometimes, even if your objects are hidden. Okay, so let's do that again. I'm just going to go to my left viewport here, and this will be much easier. I'm just going to go whoop. Make sure that's off, and just select that all the way up to here. So now I'm going to get a pretty obvious seam right across the sideburns here, but I mean, I gotta have seams somewhere, and I feel this is the least amount of geo for me to offend, so I'll just do that there, and then probably somewhere here. Alright, so let's just take that. Oh, I can detach, deselect the bottom of my mesh. So I'm just going to hit D, move that down here, and I'm just going to go map, flat mapping, and I'm going to apply a pelt map right to that. Do the same thing, stretch, and then relax. Now if it starts doing a really funky job, I may need to break it down a little further. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, see, it did a really terrible job in there. This is where pelt mapping starts messing up. It just did not understand what to do in here. So that's okay. I mean, that's definitely going to happen quite a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pelt map these guys into little sections. So let me just select let's see, we'll do that guy there. Let's pelt map him. Start relax, much better. And then I'll do the other side as well. Yeah, somewhere along probably there. I could even go closer. Make sure the bottom part's deselected again. Detach. Pelt map. Start pelt. Start relax. Wait. Commit. Now the cool thing about this is, let's see how my, before I do that, let's see how this goatee's looking. It's okay. I might do another pelt just to make sure that's looking good. All right. Now what I can try and do is I can actually try and stitch those guys back together. So if you take a look, that edge there is here. So I'm just going to select an edge in the middle, go to stitch selected. I'm going to set that to 0 so it accepts the new scale. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. There we go, and that's not too bad. So now I'm only going to get stretching on a couple of these guys. So I'm going to do the same thing, stitch selected. I'm going to do a 0.5 on this. Same thing over here. And the same thing on the other side. So pelt mapping is pretty great. Sometimes it gets a little silly if you try and make it do too much at the same time. So sometimes you got to just break things up, do them separately, and then stitch things back together manually. So it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but hey, that's a pretty good unwrap for, you know, very little amount of work that I had to do to get that. Oh hey, look, I forgot to stitch a couple parts in there. So I could always go, alright, and do something like that. And just might kind of rotate those up a little bit. Okay, so we got our beard, or bottom of the beard anyways, or top of the beard, whatever. Got bottom of the beard, front of the beard, now we got the rest of the hair. What does that look like here? How much do we got? We got quite a bit. So same thing, I got this under part of my hair, which is probably not going to pelt quite well. And I think my flat mapping did a pretty good job at selecting it for me. So let's just go clean that up a little bit. Let's just deselect all that. Again, let's give pelt map a little less to do by getting rid of these guys here. Doesn't have to be a lot, just enough to help around those corners. Right, something like that. You probably won't see a lot of that under there. So let me just deselect that. He's actually ready to go because he was flat mapped. And we can select all this and then do a pelt on that. See how that looks. Whoa. Let's see how that did. Hey, that's not bad. Nice, that's not too bad at all. So once you're done with that, your face and your head is pretty much ready to go. So I haven't done my other horn, and I haven't finished that one horn either. I'm going to finish those eventually. I'm not going to bother you in this video to show you that. So now the other problem we have is these squares also represent resolution. So these little guys are going to get, this beard's going to get a lot of resolution because it's bigger. So the bigger you make something, the smaller the squares will be because you're taking up more space, right? And then vice versa. Oops. So what we need this to be is we want it to be all the same resolution. We could give maybe a little bit less resolution for parts underneath if we really need to conserve. But for the most part, you want everything to be equal. So before we start doing that, I'm just going to collapse this down. I'm going to unhide my face and my horns and all that stuff. Where are you? Unhide all. There we go. I'm going to put an unwrap modifier on there again. Oh, I haven't unwrapped my eyes too. My eyes are currently, see, that's where all my seams are, right in the center. And that's unfortunate because that's where, like, I'm going to paint most of my detail. The rest of it, my eye is going to be white. So what I could actually do is probably just flat map my eyes for now. I mean, we're not going to be doing a lot of moving around. All right, let's see what that did. It kind of stretched them out a little, but it did, if you take a look here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's that yellow square back there. That's the planar map that it did for that. So I'm going to just commit that. Just going to remove this planar. I'm going to scale these guys down just on the one axis so they're kind of round. Now this is not a really great unwrap. You're going to get a lot of stretching right along the side of the eyes. Not really the best way to do that. I would recommend, you know, I don't really need all the back of the eyes, so I could actually delete a good chunk of these. Actually, let's just do that now. Since we're at here, I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to select the verts right in the middle of the back of the eye. I'm just going to hit grow a bunch of times. It's probably enough of my eye that I'm going to need. I'm just going to delete those. It'll save me some polygons and all that. So let's go back to unwrap. And I'm probably just going to help map these eyes here individually. There we go. Nothing too crazy. It's just an eye, just to get it a little bit of if I want to paint any veins or anything on the side, I won't get any stretching, so might as well do them right. So let's take a look at our checker again. So I was talking about resolution a second ago. Now you'll see the resolution is just all over the place on this thing, and that is not what we want. We want nice equal resolution. Now before, what we had to do is we had to take all these things and position them in the square ourselves and try and get the resolution in properly and all that. Luckily Max has done a nice little thing for us, and they have this little tool here called Arrange Elements. They have a rescale. I like to put rotate on as well to help me do some of that. And there's a little guy here called Pack Custom, so I'm just going to click that, and what it's going to do is it's going to try and pack all these guys into the square as best as it can. Now I haven't done a really good job on my my horns yet, so you know, I'm not going to worry about those for now. But let's pretend I didn't have any horns on my character. Let's just get rid of all of that. So I'm going to select these guys, I'm going to pack them in, so this is probably what your character will look like. Now, you'll notice that it put them all in the square and it scaled them all so they're all equal size, which is awesome to the world space. But what it did a really crappy job at is using a lot of this space. There's just a lot of gaps in here. It is not very good at packing things, so that's the part you still got to do manually. So do that. Make sure your model, your unwraps are also not touching the edge of the square too much. Give a little bit of a buffer. So do that, and just try and arrange these guys. I try and like flatten them out too, like arrange them to where they're going to be. So try and just squeeze them in. This is actually a part of unwrapping that I enjoy, surprisingly. It's kind of dumb, but it's kind of fun too. It's like a little puzzle game where, how well can I fit all this stuff in here without messing it up. So what is this part? This is the back of my hair. This part I don't really care about, so I just kind of tuck it in here. Anything that you're going to need to really paint up, I guess we're going to be doing a lot of painting Mudbox, so it doesn't matter as much, but try and make your stuff pretty straight on. So let's see, we got eyeball. I'm going to put my eyeballs together. I could actually, if I wanted to, later on, I could put my eyeballs over top of each other once the bake is done, but I might want some different textures for my eyes. And so you have to make sure there's no overlapping like this. All right, can't have any overlap because each of these guys need their own texture space. All right, if you want to be optimal with textures, we can reuse sections later on. And I can talk about that a little later on, but for our purposes, we definitely don't need to worry about that. We just want a really kick-ass looking texture and character model. So what I'm doing is I'm just packing them all close in together, and you'll notice now I have all this outside space, so I like to kind of start in a corner and do that on my way out. With this guy selected, the freeform tool, I can select them all and I can hold control and then uniformly just scale them up until they fit in the square again. Now you'll notice like, hey, I got a lot of space again, so I'm going to try and rearrange this stuff to try and take up as much space as I can, right? So one of the things I try and do is try and leave these two spaces equal, so then the scale will be the same. And sometimes this is harder it seems. But like I said, it's kind of fun too. It's kind of a dumb fun, but I like it. All right, so again, make sure no overlap. Make sure the meshes aren't too close together. You don't want these things too snug. Otherwise, they'll cause problems too. And like I said, try and keep common things together as best you can. And then things that are like behind the hair, behind the ear, those things you just kind of tuck away and rotate and jam in wherever. But like the face, try and keep that straight. The hair, try and keep that straight. The beard too. In Mudbox, it won't really matter, but if you ever need to go into Photoshop, which we will be doing, you really want to be able to understand your character just by looking at the UVs and the bake and stuff like that, and you don't want things to be upside down or at weird angles too much, just because it might be confusing. But you know, like bottom of the beard, I don't really care about if it's on like an angle like this. So I know I'm gonna have to redo this for my horns, but that's okay. I just wanted to move it along. So you know, I'm gonna probably put my horns in there. I might even move my ears up to the top here somewhere. All right, might do that. Again, that's the underside of my hair, so I don't really care. There we go, ear, and I'll have all that space for my horns, which should be plenty. You know, depending on how they are looking. So once you're happy with your pack, that's it. You're done. You're unwrapped for your head. And so that's all on one texture. Now you're going to have to do the exact same thing for your body. And that's all going to have to fit on one texture as well. So in my next video, you're going to get to watch me do all of this, which is both terrible and awful. And especially dealing with this belt because it's so high poly, you're going to really deal with a lot of weird vert issues and unwrap issues and stuff like that. So that's kind of a good start for unwrapping. So that's our head. If you ever want to check out what your unwraps look like, just throw a material on there and just slap like a whatever texture on there. If you go to like one of Max's things, just slap like a bark texture on there. Look at that bark, it's looking great. I put like tiling up to. There you go, look at that. Look at that nice unwrap on that. Even the hair looks kind of cool on there. That's either a seam or a weird tile in the wood. And if I put this on my body, it's gonna look terrible because I have no unwrap yet and it's awful. So yeah, this is looking great. So try and aim for that, and I'll see you in the next video.